big issue. How do you finance and implement these projects? I'll sum it up here in these next couple of slides here, just to give you guys a little bit of market know-how or background. Who's developing projects today? You see the nonprofit sector in there in a big way, and a lot of this happens with international projects because most people don't want to take the risk. So you need a lot of outside philanthropic money to support that. Private sector, groups like ourselves, groups like Dirk will be speaking next, are working on projects, taking a little bit of risk and helping various groups get over that finish line just to prove pilots and prove that it could work. And public sector, you have government supporting some of this as well, and you see that through initiatives that are happening here in BC, for example, Pacific Carbon Trust, backing and buying tons from some projects that are being developed. Just to give you a little more context, who is buying CSR and why are they buying CSR forestry projects? Some corporate buyers, this is what they're saying. Biggest thing, community environmental benefits. First Nations has a very interesting angle that they can benefit from. Certainly the benefits that can happen at the community level and the environmental level are huge because we're talking about large areas of traditional land that need restoration because years and years and years ago when forestry did take place, things weren't necessarily in some cases brought back to the proper ecosystem level of homeostasis that they should be. So, you know, it's certainly the ability to redefine, I think, CSR and what it could be in a perfect scenario. Scale of deforestation and climate change problem. People are realizing that deforestation, even from a North American level, could be addressed in a much better way. And of course, acknowledging that there may well be a climate problem, and forests play a huge, huge role in that. And the tangibility of the offsets. You know, it's something that you can touch and feel. It's not like capturing methane from a landfill. These are something that you can actually see and observe over time. Reasons for buying compliance forestry, well, no reasons. You just want the cheapest credit available for compliance. So very different motivation. And it still achieves the end goal. It's still putting money back into forests and still putting the price on that ecosystem. Intellectually, you have to determine what you're more comfortable with. Just a quick policy outlook here. Alberta has had a trading system for quite a while. Forestry doesn't play yet, agriculture does, but will forestry play? $1-million question. I think it will. Not today, but it's coming down the pipeline. AB 32 in California, this is the closest we've gotten to seeing forestry in any compliant system in a really tangible way. And as we said, CAR is the protocol that's playing there right now and is likely to play. And perhaps BC, if we stay the course with emissions trading and join in with California, Ontario, and Quebec, definitely forestry will play a big role in that. And I think Canada has a lot to say when it comes to forestry. First Nations, of course, have a big role in that. Quebec and Ontario, they're next in the pipeline. I think Quebec is coming out with their emissions trading framework shortly, and they're already talking about what's going to be within that framework. So I think forestry will play a role there. Western Climate Initiative is the overall umbrella that looks at BC, California, Ontario, and Quebec. How is it going to play within that umbrella? Yet to be seen, but those discussions are happening. And are we going to see the consolidation of regional schemes? Yes, we will, I think, as long as we have enough leverage under the WCI if most of these jurisdictions join in. And of course, I think Dirk may end up talking about it a little bit. But internationally, RED, where does that play? RED may play into some of these North American schemes, but certainly it may play into the EU ETS down the road as well in least developed countries. So there's a lot coming down the pipe. None of this is easy, and I apologize because that's a lot of information. It's a very dynamic space. We try and keep our heads on policy as well as what's coming down the pipeline with protocols and development. And I think the First Nations, we've been engaging with a lot of them locally here to get into this conversation because they have a very big role to play. And certainly we're here to help if anybody has any questions. I'll let Rob sum it up, and then we'll pass it on to Dirk.
Thank you very much, David. And I just have 3 short comments to make. And thanks, David, for that excellent presentation. The first is that I just remind everybody that forests are the only practical way to remove vast tonnages of CO2 from the atmosphere. There is no technology to do that, so forests are going to continue to play a role in climate mitigation. The second point I'd like to make is that the current markets are very fragmented. They're developing. The potential is huge, but the markets out there right now are not are not fully developed, and there's much to come. There are limited markets for CSR, which is corporate social responsibility / voluntary charismatic markets. Those are not large. The potential is significant, but they are not large. The regulated marketplaces are all under development with few exceptions. Most of that potential has yet to be realized. So it's not like you can just do a project and go out there and be assured that there's a huge appetite for the product that you have at this point in time. It's still very much under development. So that closes off our presentation, and we'll turn it back to the other folks, Dirk, and his presentation.
Hi. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for that informative presentation. So now I'm going to pass the mic over to Dirk Brinkman, who is actually speaking in place of someone from Living Carbon. Dirk, and I'll have maybe Dirk can explain a little bit more about that. Dirk is a senior executive and co-founder of the Brinkman Group of companies. Since 1970, Dirk has been a core contributor to the innovation of operational practices and policy in reforestation, ecosystem restoration, conservation, and climate solutions in Canada, U.S., and in the tropics. He has been a speaker at numerous conferences and workshops, published over 100 articles and editorials, and contributed to many workshops and working committees in forestry. His company, which has planted over 1 billion trees, is the reforestation leader in Canada and is an FSC resource manager in Central America. Brinkman now operates in several countries. So I'll pass the presentation over. Dirk.
Thanks. Bryony's presently in the Charlotte leading a nature tour. She does most years, and asked if I would do the presentation. It was developed to see if I can forward as required. Good. It's developed by Bryony and myself and Frederick Vrum, who is a forest analyst working with us. And I have it broken into 4 sections. I'm hoping to have some questions. I believe there's a little bit more time in this presentation than typically. And the first section is who is Living Carbon, and a background on our group and its relationship to Living Carbon and the approach we're taking to this market. But before I step in, it was just intriguing to have the Carrier Sekani host, because in '68, my first work in British Columbia was clearing ahead of the Williston Reservoir. Of course, you can't help thinking about that project from a climate perspective. What if we did not clear those 176,000 hectares? As you can see, I'm cutting a beautiful fir. There were a tremendous amount of timber in the valley bottom, and there would be at least 75 million tons of carbon dioxide on the landscape that now is technically and in many cases worse than actually in the atmosphere, because a lot of that wood's in the reservoir where it's emitting as methane. And of course, my first work with First Nations was working with Francis Isaac, who is also a faller at the time, who taught me how we lived off the land, from which I learned to camp on site and do the work where I worked, that is, and that led to our tree planting operations. I learned a lot from Francis, and the land ethic that we brought from our years of reforestation and ecosystem restoration experience. We brought in '08 to the Land Trust Alliance when they invited me to prepare a paper for having carbon help with the conservation initiatives within the land trust. And